Join us today here at Chris's Granite Paradise as we discuss a surprisingly common yet very beautiful mineral specimen that can be found in the rivers along the Front Range of the Rockies, specifically here in Fort Collins, and that is Graphic Granite. A very beautiful material. Thank you for joining us. One beautiful aspect about feldspar, and this carries therefore over into graphic granite, is when you find a piece that's hard enough and solid enough to cut and polish, it often has a sheen. Of course, most of us are familiar with labradorite. Labradorite is a variety of feldspar, and of course it really has that sheen exaggerated. It's bright colors. But these common feldspars along our rivers, most of them also have a sheen. You can see this piece is polished. You can see the reflection of the sun, but aside from that, you can see the sheen. See how it, I believe that's showing up in the video. Very nice. So that's a very attractive feature in a feldspar. This one here, this large graphic granite, hitting it at the right angle. Again, you can see that sheen. Not all of them have it, or at least if you don't cut them the right way, along the right plane, you don't get the sheen. For the sake of this video, I'm using our little fire pit gravel space here on the patio as a sample riverbed. The best way that I find to look for these, because they really aren't very exciting from a distance. They're not bright colors. They don't really have much of a pattern from a distance. But the way I find them is I look for the reflections. I hope these are showing up in the video. Again, these are single crystals. And so even if the rock is round, it reflects as a single shiny face, basically. I hope that's showing up in the video. Back up here, it actually works better from more of a distance. This is a good activity to do in winter when the sun is at a low angle. You have a whole big gravel bar ahead of you and you just look for these reflections. And keep your eye on the reflection, because if you lose the reflection, you probably lose the rock by the time you walk up to it. When we speak of graphic granite, first let's clarify what it isn't. Graphic granite is actually not granite. This rock here is more typical of a granite. It's mostly feldspar and quartz, but also you can see some other dark minerals, probably mica and hornblende or something along those lines. But the other thing we notice, if you can see the reflections, the crystals are quite random. You can see many small crystals of about the same size, and the feldspar crystals reflect the light quite randomly, no matter how I turn this rock. In contrast, the graphic granite is actually just a single feldspar crystal. And the way you can tell is the reflection, the whole rock will reflect along the same plane, the same cleavage planes. So technically it's not a granite, it would actually be a crystal within a granite, if you can imagine it that way. Graphic granite is actually a term that more accurately refers to a type of crystal growth. In this case, it is a single crystal of feldspar interlaced with quartz. In contrast to the term granite, which implies plutonic igneous rock consisting of quartz, feldspar, and usually mica, and maybe a few other minerals. Here is a tabletop that we have in the house. I wanted to show it to you because it is a great example of the environment in which graphic granite might form. You can see from a distance, you can see the larger crystals, you can see the gigantic feldspar crystals also, along with the quartz. The long black ones are biotite, and the reason I know that is because when the slabs would break, they would break along those and it would just be mica. Sometimes they've come in being tourmaline, and we've even seen this particular slab come in with aquamarine and garnets. It's an amazing combination. But if we zoom in here on the feldspar, we can see how the growth lines or the growth patterns are the same throughout the whole crystal. And when you come to a boundary, such as in this case, you can see there's a crack right here. And if you look close, I hope it's showing in the video, the striation patterns change. They're different in one crystal compared to the other. And if we move up here towards the corner, you can see there's a third crystal boundary right about in the center now, where there is not a crack, but you can see that those are two different crystals because the lines are going different directions. And I doubt we could call this graphic granite just because it's so fine, but graphic granite would be the same way. These are probably just slight variations within the feldspar itself. And of course the quartz, there's some more feldspar over here. Trying to focus on those patterns. They're pretty clear. Anyway, I hope this gives you an idea of what I'm referring to when I talk about a granite pegmatite environment in which these crystals grow. Graphic granite forms in granite pegmatites, or pegmatites of similar rocks. And they are basically, in a pegmatite, the crystals are very large, but when these break apart and are eroded, as most of these are river washed specimens, of course the crystals break along their boundaries. There's just not a lot of strength there. So by the time they roll down the river and come into my hand, they're a single crystal, or a portion of a single large crystal. And what these crystals consist of, and I'll post the link in the description. I found a gentleman who called it Eutectics and Disequilibrium crystallization, and basically he was saying how the solution, as it's cooling, is saturated with two basic minerals. In this case, feldspar. Here's a typical piece of feldspar like we would find in the Cache la Poudre River here in Fort Collins. This is actually a nice piece in that it's solid. I would recommend polishing this one. I bet you it would have an amazing sheen, as I described earlier. It's free of cracks. At the end of the video, I'm going to put the end card for the Colorado Unakite video that I did, because in that video I gave a more lengthy explanation of how to tell a good rock from a bad rock in terms of polishing and cutting and things of that nature. But suffice it to say, this one is very hard, very smooth, free of cracks. And then the other main mineral would be quartz. And beautiful quartz specimens like this are also common in the Cache la Poudre River, and I would imagine in all the rivers along the Front Range. Here's another piece of it here. And these specimens actually display nice striations, which I think form in a similar fashion as the graphic granite, and they're often found in the same pegmatites together. But back to what this gentleman was saying in his video, if you can imagine a soup of a solution consisting mostly of feldspar and quartz. And feldspar and quartz have very similar, very close temperatures at which they begin to crystallize. So what happens is, if you can imagine, the solution is saturated with quartz. The quartz crystallizes out. But as soon as enough quartz grows, then all of a sudden the solution has too much feldspar, and then a layer of feldspar grows. And so you end up with this very, very repeated pattern. Quartz feldspar, quartz feldspar, quartz feldspar, quartz feldspar, in this graphic pattern. No matter where you find them, no matter what color the feldspar is, the pattern is always the same. I would imagine in the case of this amazonite, the cooling was faster because the pattern is much tighter. You can see compared to my finger, it's almost like hair. The quartz lines are very fine. And then in this one, in contrast, they're much further apart. Another pattern in a graphic granite that is perhaps a little less common is where on the side it looks like long stripes of quartz and feldspar. You can see them reflecting there. But when you look at the end of the rock, it almost looks like holding a box of straws in your hand. And if you look at the side of the box of straws, or a handful of straws, they all look long. And then if you look at the ends, you see all the little circles. And that's kind of what we're seeing in this specimen here. And it has a particular name. I'd have to research that again. It's another long word. In my videos, I tend to stay in layman's terminology. Well, thank you for joining us today here for this brief look at graphic granite here in Chris's Granite Paradise.